You know what's interesting about the life of certain comedians? I love how not all, but some that I've interviewed as of late, how they stumble into the business and they're like, "Well, Jay Farrell, because you mentioned Saturday Night Live." He was like, "No, I knew that's what I was going to do. I knew it like right away." And you've had a life like you sold insurance, you played football in college, you won a chip, you had all of these other things that happened to you, and when you realized you were funny, you were like, "That's it." Did you ever feel like you knew when you got on stage you were meant to perform? You knew that you were going to perform in some way in life, but you had no idea being a comedian, or you were like, "I am going to be a comedian" the very first time you did it. That's
Hell
it.
no. Right. No. I was that dude. I was always socially a step above. I felt like when it just came to I don't know, just being from Atlanta and being in those social settings, and Black Atlanta back then was just thumping, and you know everything about Black Atlanta in the late early '80s and the early '90s. It's just like, oh, we supposed to be leaders. We're supposed to be
Wait,
mayors.
time out. Time out.
Uh,
What's Black Atlanta? Because Atlanta's still black to me. What what's is it not Black Atlanta now?
It's still Black Atlanta, but Black Atlanta is when we are the mayor, the sheriff, the council people. Like Black Atlanta in those times was unheard of. So I refer to it as, I guess, like Black Atlanta, but now it's super black. It's black on.
Okay, okay. First
But
of
I, but
all,
but I guess what I'm trying to say is that Atlanta had so many black leaders compared to its neighbors. So
okay,
we still refer to it as Black Atlanta, where Georgia is Georgia, but
for
Atlanta
sure.
is. So so when I went down to Miami, I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to be a leader on a football team that had a gazillion leaders. So that didn't necessarily work out for me. But as far as just the social scene on the campus of the University of Miami, I knew I wanted to be a leader and throw the parties and provide stuff for black people to do. Because it's a very small campus, even though it has a very popular football team. Um, and then after that, just everywhere I went, I knew I was going to do something, and I didn't know what I was. I always felt that I was great at everything, like decent grades, and people like being around me. So I'm like, what am I going to do with myself? And I don't know why I spent all those years in school just to be a comedian, but I fell in love with it the first time I touched the mic. Like I wanted to be a rapper. I wanted to rap, and it just didn't sound right.
No, that's a real thing. I wanted to be a rapper. What are you talking about? Like depending on how life was, and then I was like, that's just not feasible for me. But I was like, "Mom, I want to be a rapper." She's like, "No, you don't." And I was like, "Okay." She killed my dream. So I understand your dream. You were self realized or actualized, as people would say. You knew that you couldn't be a rapper because you couldn't rap. Is that what we're hearing?
I wanted to be an R&B singer. I was in an R&B group in Miami, and then I realized I couldn't sing. And then I just said, "Oh, I'm not supposed to do either one of those." Because in the group, I sounded great. When we went in the studio and you go in the booth by yourself, I'm like, "Who is that?" They're like, "That's you." I was like, "Well, let me be the manager." So I
But
was always
that's my point. You wanted to perform. You knew that you were going to be a performer in some capacity.
in some
When
capacity.
did what did you when you got on stage and you laughed the first time and it made everybody laugh the first time, and then when you went back and you got booed, what was it that you killed at? When you got up there, do you remember what your set was? Do you remember what your jokes were? That very first time you did it.
Well, the very first time I did it, it was just this. It was this clever thing that I made up in the moment. There was this woman heckling everybody. And I mean, literally from the host to whoever. And they didn't want to put her out, but they was like, "Miss, you got to shut up." And she kept going, "Ah, ah, ah, ah." She just kept making that noise. And so he said, "Okay, you can do that with me. I'm the professional." The host did. But when these open micers come out, she kept doing it. So when I went up there, one of my jokes was, "Hey man, how many of y'all went to public school?" And half the crowd, they was clapping. I was like, "Well, in public school, they got like a bell for every like natural disaster." I said, if it's a tornado drill, they go ding, 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 ding. We all line up, get against the wall. I said for a hurricane drill, it'd be like, dinner, dinner, dinner. We know we put our heads between our legs and get up on the desk. I said for a fire drill, we didn't have no bell or alarm. We just had that drunk bitch in the back going, ah! Everybody fell out laughing.
And she liked it too, obviously. She
Oh,
laughed.
it was dying. And so the dude was just like, oh man, you funny, man. You just made that up. You got a gift, man. Come back next week. And I was like, okay. And then next week, Cari, I showed up in a shirt and tie. I invited my friends. And when I tell you, I heard the worst sound, because not actually getting booed, but silence is the
The
worst
worst.
sound you can ever
The
hear.
worst.
And it's so deafening that my 3 minute set, it felt like 20 minutes. And nobody said nothing. I couldn't even talk about somebody's mama or somebody's shirt because nobody said nothing to me first. So it was just one of those, okay, well, what else I got? And then I heard this. And this is actually the worst sound you can hear in comedy. When somebody do this, that thing was so loud. This girl looked at me. She was just like, and I was like, ah. And then after that set, all my friends, they left, they waved. They was like, all right, Finesse, appreciate you. All right. And they all left. And I was over there by myself. And the host was like, man, what happened to that thing you did last week, man? And I was like, you can repeat stuff? And he was like, yeah, man, you supposed to repeat stuff and build on that. And I was like, oh. I said, well, I'm going to come back next week. He said, okay, come back next week. And then I just kept growing and learning and realizing it was something you had to work at. And I accepted the challenge. And, 3 years after that, I was on Comic View. 4 years after Comic View, I was on SNL.
Well, here's my question.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the fact that it was 3 minutes, but when no one is responding, it felt like 20 minutes because silence is deafening for a comedian. Silence is deafening for people who are artists, period, and you need some type of call and response.
Mm-hmm.
That leads me to the idea of failure. And when you don't do well at something as a comedian, how does that sit in your spirit? How do you get over that?
Well, thank God I had those type of parents that was like, oh, you gonna fail, but you gonna
Mhm.
respond. And a lot of times when you grow up in sports and being involved in activities, organized sports activities, you're gonna lose. And so it's not like you don't show up for practice that Monday. You got to show up and still do them 25 jumping jacks and them windmills and all that and run the heel, all that stuff and practice your plays because you got a game the next week. So I wasn't really bothered, and I never really had an ego to the point where I was like, well, y'all can't boo me. That's why I couldn't attack anybody because I felt like nobody said anything to me where I could be like, well, look at your shirt and look at who you with, because it would have been out of character. So thank God, like I said, I didn't have an ego at the time, and it was a learning experience, and I just chalked it up as I'll be better prepared because I really
But
did think I could wing it.
but over the course of your career, there's clearly have been, as it is with anyone's career, my career, anyone with a career, period, you have these disappointments. How do you handle that? How do you push on? And I'm going somewhere with this. So I'm wondering, as someone with a platform and public facing, when things don't work your way, how do you figure it out? And how do you not let the no's stop you?
You have to have that village or even that very small, tight knit community of friends that's like, oh, well, and you have two sets in that same group because you have that group that's like, what you do wrong. I ain't do nothing wrong. And then you had that other group that's that other side of those friends that's like, yo, you'll get them next time. You know, those what you did wrong friends, they gonna challenge you and get under your skin, but
Mhm.
they're your friends, and they ain't trying to be malicious. Those are your friends. And those
Mhm.
other friends are almost like your parents and your mama. Well, you gonna get up there and get them next time because it's gonna be a next time, right? You gonna get
Mhm.
them next time, right? And you like,
Mhm.
yeah, 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 I'm gonna get them next time. And so it's very important not to go into withdraw into yourself and have self doubt when nobody is there or around to build you back up or to at least put you back even. And that's all you really need is to get back even because people knock you down a little bit. You ain't really trying to get up. Just get back even, back to your normal self just to say, well, y'all will see me next week. And I think that's extremely important, where you're in a business where you're constantly being judged, constantly being critiqued. People are waiting for you to fail. People are waiting for you to say something that's make a mistake, basically. Because often in our business, we surround ourselves with people that's only interested in that 10%. And if they feel like they can't make that 10% off of you, then they'll move on. And then you'll feel
Mm.
like, damn, I was used, you know. Oh, they told me I was this and that. But it's so easy for them to replace you with somebody who won't make a mistake and or who's just that next person up, you know?
The 10% is not necessarily even in money. I've come to find out 10% can be the access that you have that you may no longer have. So you don't have those same friends, or you don't have those same people calling you friends, because you may not have resources or access that you had when you were quote unquote it or poppin' or whatever it may be. I ask that because a lot of comedians that I know, um, and even just there is the narrative that comedians are sad, that privately they spend a lot of their time being really quiet and sad, and the people who love them and know them the most know that. Is that true?
Yes, to some degree. I think a lot of those people that fit into that box, that's all they are. That's all they see themselves as. And for me, I mean, I'm just an awesome dude. I love God. I love my family. Super smart. I love writing. I love I just love kids. I love building people up. And these are just not like talking points where it's just like, oh, these are all the. But I think about all the stuff I love to do. I love playing poker. I love uh, I love gardening. I stay in Home Depot and Lowe's in the gardening section. And so when you can retreat back to stuff that you actually love that has nothing to do with show business, that helps a
Mm,
lot. When people have this I'm going to make it in show business or burst attitude, then you actually do surround yourself people with people who are only interested in you making it, or who only are interested in getting more access to things that you allow them to get access to through you, you know.
mhm,
um, and so a lot of times I say the 10 percenters, it's not necessarily the money, but that's the access in your life, because that's the only percentage of the time they show up. When it's time to
mm.
walk into a club, when it's time to go backstage at a concert, that's only 10% of your entire life. So those are the 10 percenters, you know.
For
But
for
they have such an influence over your psyche because you gave them that power.